It's Win. Welcome to another educational video by the Entropy system. A while back, I received a pair of comments on my initial video where my alters and I talk a little bit about what it's like to live with dissociative identity disorder. Both comments expressed some skepticism on the legitimacy of my diagnosis, and both alluded to the idea that having DID seemed to be a trend lately. I'm assuming that they're referring to the uptick of DID YouTubers over the past few years and the explosion of them over the past couple months. So is saying I have DID trendy now? Well, yeah. Kind of. Let me tell you about it. Dissociative identity disorder has a centuries-old record of stigma. The very first recorded case of dissociative identity disorder happened in 1584, where a young woman was believed to be possessed. Luckily for us, she recorded the details of her exorcism quite thoroughly, and modern-day psychologists were able to look at it and recognize that what she was describing was, to the letter, dissociative identity disorder. A similar case of DID thought to be possession was recorded in 1623. Even though we have these records, there wasn't an actual diagnosis of dissociative identity disorder, then called multiple personality disorder, until 1882. Fast forward about 100 years, and you have Sybil being released in the early 1970s as a book, and then a couple years later as a feature-length film that was, of course, framed and scored and lit just like a horror film. Though multiple personality disorder was finally on the public radar, and the numbers of diagnoses exploded. Not because it was suddenly cool or trendy to have, but because people didn't know what to look for, or didn't know to look for it at all. Since then, people have been discussing dissociative identity disorder, but never really in a great light.
Today, it is called multiple personality disorder.
Never was multiple personality disorder, or later dissociative identity disorder, displayed in a positive light, in a way where someone could look at that and say, wow, they're really functional humans. And then, in 2013, something beautiful happened. Diaries of a Broken Mind was released.
To get inside our minds.
Why? In order to understand what it's like to have a mental health disorder.
And most importantly, it featured Jess.
I will be the first boy dinosaur. Put my glasses on. Do I look a bit more glam?
Diaries of an Open Mind is an award-winning documentary that showcases 25 individuals with varying mental disorders living their daily lives. A young woman named Jess, who has dissociative identity disorder, is featured prominently. She was shown to have struggles, but here she was, going to school, having a job, being in a healthy relationship. These kinds of things were not showcased in depictions of dissociative identity disorder up until this point. Unfortunately for Jess, being a front runner on a big social movement isn't an easy task. She ended up losing her job because her workplace saw the documentary. She received a lot of hate on the internet, and she sort of disappeared into the shadows for a while. But then Diaries of a Broken Mind won the Mental Health Media Awards, and Jess was encouraged again. She was reinvigorated and started her YouTube channel called Multiplicity in Me. Here she showcased snippets of her daily life, hoping to break down the stigma behind the idea of evil alters, and giving people like me hope that even with a diagnosis of DID, things were gonna be okay. Jess was a real inspiration to a lot of people, and her steps lit a flame of inspiration into YouTubers like the Labyrinth System and the Stronghold System, who decided to add their voices in the battle to break stigma against this disorder. Slowly, YouTubers began to pop up, most of them claiming Jess as their initial inspiration. But Jess and her system weren't really comfortable being the one and only big name out there with dissociative identity disorder. They wanted other people to tell their story as well, because they knew that A, their version of dissociative identity disorder is not the only look for dissociative identity disorder, and also they recognized that the larger the pool of voices were speaking out about this disorder and about the truth of it, the more effective it would become. Collectively, as we work together, we're stronger. And so she initiated the project Multiplicity and us.
We're just one example of this disorder. Like, all we expected to happen was to be like one drop in the ocean. I want to push the attention like away from us, and I actually want to introduce a project that Jake's been doing called Multiplicity and Us.
Originally, it was meant to be its own channel where people would send her videos and she would upload them, creating a space for DID YouTubers from all over the world to be showcased together.
And it originally was going to be a channel, but we decided that was actually just going to be too much pressure.
Right before its initial launch, it was changed to a playlist so that rather than everyone sending videos to her and her running the YouTube channel, people who wanted to participate would all have their own YouTube channels, and some of their videos would be put on the playlist so people could access it and see all the voices out there trying to tell people the truth about dissociative identity disorder. For me, and many like myself, that was the push we needed to get online and start talking. Now there seems to be another DID YouTuber popping up once a week, and I think that's fantastic. Is it a trend? Yeah, it is. It's trendy now to say, I'm not afraid. I'm not embarrassed by who I am. I can be a functional human being. I don't have to be ashamed of my diagnosis. And that's a trend I can really get behind. If you'd like to check out some of the other YouTubers who have been making videos about their system and their experience, I'm going to put a link to the Multiplicity and Us playlist below in the description. I definitely encourage you to check it out. I am happy to call myself friends with a lot of these YouTubers and have connected with just about all of them on social media and online support groups. So despite the hateful comments, I plan on continuing to make videos for the foreseeable future. Does that mean I'm just a bandwagoner? I don't know, maybe, but when the trend is breaking stigma, I'm fine with that. That's all for now. Have a great day.